So you talked earlier about people living to 120, 130 years old. How are you able to cope and deal with people living to such a long age?
One of the things that we're beginning to understand is that aging isn't a natural condition per se. That it could be, some people like Aubrey de Grey, the gerontologist from Cambridge, argues that aging is a disease, not a natural condition, and so the first person to live to 500 could already be 50 years old, and that through our lives we'll see a series of breakthroughs that extend our lifespan by not just 40 or 50 days a year, which is what's happening at present, but maybe by 5, 10 or 50 years at a time. How we cope with that as a society, I think, is really tough. We're seeing research go on in terms of proteins that control aging, that might, if we could switch the proteins off, that might extend our lifespan by 50 to 100 years. We don't really understand how we'll cope with a society which has people from birth through to 200 in the same community. It's beyond the brainful, again, to understand. But we're having to start to think about, well, how will those people live their lives? So whereas while some functions in the body will continue, some organs will carry on their lifespan, others will wear out. Take our limbs, take our hands. So one of the big potential growth industries of the future, for example, is artificial limbs, and we see an example here from Touch Bionics of, if you like, the bionic hand. People remember the Bionic Man. Well, this is a limb that costs between 30 and 50,000 pounds, and will have more and more intelligence in it. And actually, we could see a situation where the limbs we have tomorrow have more functionality and intelligence built into them than the ones we have today. But again, this is where the boundaries between science fiction and fantasy and reality have crossed over. You can get from these guys an artificial limb right now. And I think we're going to be focusing much more on those things about how we help people cope. For example, language translators. So when your 150-year-old great-great-great-great-grandfather sits with their 12-year-old great-great-nephew, they understand how to communicate with each other, because they'll be using totally different language constructs, they'll have totally different cultural reference points. Simple things like, how do I translate what you're saying to what I understand? How do I still keep functioning in the workplace when I'm 120 if I need to, because the pension system isn't designed for me to have a 90-year retirement. So that many things will be challenged by this. They're already being challenged today, and they'll continue to be challenged, whether it's pensions, whether it's the kind of services you need, whether it's the political impact. Already we know in the UK that the average age of voters is over 50. Well, that skews where the political parties lay out their agenda, and as we get older and older, they know where the votes are. So the risk is that political choices and allocation of resources get skewed by the age profile of society.
What about ethical concerns? Is it right to meddle with nature?
Well, this has been a concern since the first scientists did their first experiment. We're always going to have this issue about the ethics of what science can do versus what society wants to do or believes it should do. And always we'll find somewhere in the world people willing to go beyond what other countries accept. I think the real challenge now is about science education in society and really getting the whole of society far better informed about what science is doing, where it's going, what might be possible. So we have a much more informed debate about what the science can do for us, the benefits, but also the downsides, and then we start to make decisions on a consistent basis. The more we start to build in artificial limbs, 3D printed organs, enhanced memory through putting memory chips in, all this stuff is happening right now, the more we're changing what it means to be a human. So by 2030, 2040, it's very likely that you and I will be augmented in many ways. And the question is, how far will society accept that augmentation before we say, actually, you're no longer a human, you're part cyborg, different rules apply to you, different laws apply to you, you have different freedoms, there'll be different constraints on what you can do versus an unaugmented human. I think the 2012 Olympics are probably the last time where the Olympic authorities have any chance of catching drug cheats, for example. The range of augmentations coming, chemical, electronic, muscular, are going to be such that by 2016 it will be very hard to catch them. And we may just have to say, look, do what you want. Be as augmented as you want. The games are open to anyone.
Why is that? Why would they not be able to catch?
Because the science is moving so fast, and the amount of investment going into human enhancement, and whether it's chemical, electronic, muscular, or other kind of forms of medical advancement. There's a huge investment going into this across the planet, way more than the investment in tracking whether it's happening or not. So that the drug testing authorities really are way behind the game in terms of their ability to spot this stuff and to understand that you have a silicon fiber implant in your leg that is enabling you to withstand much more force or whatever, or you've actually, your skin is now an exoskeleton that's been grown for you. And the technology and the science are moving so fast that it will be very hard for the authorities to keep pace with even what's happening, let alone the science and the technology to track it and monitor and test for it.